You've got a game this week, and you know what the monster of the week is going to be, but you don't have an adventure yet. How do you take that leap? You know you're doing bandits, but that's not a story. Stories have a dramatic question. So you start asking yourself questions. What are the bandits doing? Why do the players care? What can be done about it? What happens if the players fail? Motivation, intention, stakes. That's a story. Let's talk about how to make an adventure, because it's a lot easier than you might think. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where we've evolved beyond the villain's monologue and elevated to a greater plane of existence. It's a villain dialogue now. My name is Daði. I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for over 10 years. When your players arrive in their next town, in Soda Springs, they are met by a retired military veteran named Gregor Helt. He invites them in for a lovely dinner and a chat, and over the course of that conversation, your players will realize Gregor is not a nice guy. He's leading a party of mercenaries called the Hungry Mutts, and they've violently taken control of this entire village and are currently oppressing its people, and force them to build the tower they currently live in. Unless your players stop them, these tyrants will continue to reign with terror forever. Immediately, we've answered a bunch of those questions. What are the bandits doing? They're violently oppressing the townsfolk into service. Why do the players care? They're hopefully good people, but failing that, the townsfolk will likely be grateful towards saviors, gold rewards, or a safe haven for the future. What can be done about it? The players can introduce the Hungry Mutts to the sharp end of a blade, or the hot end of a fireball. Dealer's choice. It's a classic D&D solution. Violence. What happens if the players fail? The Hungry Mutts live to oppress another day. As an added bonus, we can ask a dramatic, open question. What if the town is in a particularly dangerous area, and the protection of the Hungry Mutts is keeping it safe? Do the ends justify the means? That's a different sort of dramatic question. It's an open question. You, the DM, refuse to answer and let your players think it through. Their opinions will have political differences. Some might think the security is worth the tyranny. Others might think that freedom is best, even at any cost, while some think they can make up for the lost security by protecting the town themselves. The process of coming up with a plot is all about asking yourselves questions and then answering them. Or in the case of open questions, making sure there isn't an obvious correct answer. That's the key to any open question in RPGs. The DM can't answer it. Otherwise, it's not an open question. Let your players debate and disagree. So we have a premise, tyrant protectors, and we have a stat block, bandits. But we're not done. I think of adventures as three things: premise, monsters, and a structure, or PMS for short. So what's our structure? We're going to make a 5-room dungeon, because this video is a part of Dungeon Jam 2025. But what is Dungeon Jam? It's a YouTuber collaboration event with loads of your favorite Dungeon Tubers taking part. Starting today on the 25th day of the 5th month in 2025, and for the next 5 days, Dungeon Tubers celebrate 5-room dungeons, which is a format invented by John 4, not 5, from roleplayingtips.com, and it's the easiest way to prepare a one-shot. I've covered the format in depth in a previous video, but in short, a 5-room dungeon is a story structure that splits a single session of D&D into 5 story beats, or rooms. They are the entrance, the puzzle, the setback, the climax, and the resolution. And it's dead easy. Literally anyone can make a 5-room dungeon in just a few minutes and run them the same night. To that end, let's make a 5-room dungeon. We'll put the bandits in a tower. Here's a tower. It's got 4 floors, each containing 1 room, basically. They are living quarters, just like a really nice room. The Hungry Mutts' status symbol, full of the stuff they've robbed from the townsfolk. The armory, which is full of weapons they own to equip themselves for protecting their fief and controlling the locals. The storage, full of stuff they've looted from various attacks on the town. These are the things they took from their attackers. In your game, it might be a hint at what else is out there in the forest. For instance, there is loads of ankh that eat corpses. The top floor is a workshop. 4 workbenches they use to repair their weapons. Little else of value. And finally, a 5th room. Let's say the top of the tower has these crenellations for watching over the local area. 60 feet above the ground, which is on a hill, so they're likely 100 feet or so above the actual ground level, or sea level, whatever you want to call it. Enough to get a good look around. All right, done. If this were a typical 5-room dungeon, we'd lay our encounters, or scenes, out in each room, from the bottom of the tower all the way to the top. We go entrance, puzzle, setback, climax, and resolution. So the big fight then, the climax, happens in the workshop. Yeah, but we don't have to do that, because a 5-room dungeon is a story structure, not a hard and fast rule. Rooms are just scenes, dungeons are just adventures, and story structures aren't spaces. Because here's the simple truth. All stories exist in a structure. Humans are hard-coded to hear and tell stories. It's in our bones. We've been telling stories for as long as we've been around. It's how we communicate. We're basically just pack animals that ingest structured information. Aristotle, this Greek guy who was alive 2,000 years ago, wrote the book on story structures. And it hasn't changed since. Aristotle's Poetics describes stories as having an inciting incident, followed by rising tension, a climax, falling tension, and then finally, a resolution. That's 5 rooms. Sure, the words may be different. The thing he calls the climax, we call our setback, and then his falling action is our climax, or whatever. Stories have a 3-act structure, but each act has components. It can sometimes be broken down into 8 sequences, but you can also split each act up in 2. The first act has some setup, followed by the inciting incident, the entrance. The second act has fun and games, where we do the classic premise stuff, like a puzzle in D&D, but it also has the tonal opposite, the dark night of the soul, the setback where everything falls apart. Finally, the third act has our most important features, the climax and the resolution. Sound familiar? Every story you've ever heard, seen, or played abides by some kind of structure because humans have been telling each other stories ever since we learned to communicate. And the thing is, the way we tell these stories hasn't really changed, ever. We can tell when someone messes it up. We can feel it in our gut. Like, if you've ever left a movie theater and felt like it dragged in places, you know what I'm talking about, because the innate sense of this movie dragged in the middle, or man, that final fight went on forever, that's your instinct telling you that the story's pacing was off. Movies with a slump in the middle failed to build the rising tension, or got to the dark night of the soul too late, or too soon. Movies with an endless final fight got to the climax too soon, and then to the resolution too late, creating bloat. Each story beat has its place within the structure, and you may think, what about art house films that don't follow the standard Hollywood formula? Well, they also follow some kind of structure. All of them. Beginning, middle, and end. Don't be afraid of story structure. Every artist you've ever respected abides by it, to some degree. So, here's what we're going to do. Our dungeon is undergoing 5-room mitosis. We're splitting our 5 scenes away from our 5 rooms. Why not? They don't have to be in the same place. How might a non-spatial 5-room dungeon look? Well, using the same premise, how's this? The entrance. As the players approach the town, a small retinue of hungry mutts, led by Gregor Helt, approaches the party and invites them to the tower for drinks and food. He's cordial, complimentary, polite, and desperate to avoid the PCs going into town. If they take him up on the offer, we continue with our scene list as normal, but they could decide to fight him, and then this 5-room dungeon is just a big fight now and another fight at the tower with the rest. That's okay. The puzzle. John Fr sometimes calls this encounter the roleplay challenge, so let's do that instead. Gregor Helt just talks to the players. He's polite, but sort of generally intimidating. He'll try to avoid making his position as the local despot obvious, but he's also someone who brags about how nice he has it. So the players are going to get a sense of what's going on, and Gregor is proud of the fact that he protects these people. He'll make a big show of it, talk about all the corpse-eating ankegs he's killed, and he's proud of the fact that he's a good fighter, a really good one. Maybe good enough that the players doubt their ability to take him on. He'll talk himself up. More doubt is introduced as he talks about how these people need his protection, how much they rely on him. The players might wonder what happens if he dies. Will they doom the town? There's that open question we talked about earlier. The whole scene has this tense aura. Do we fight? When do we fight? Do we come back later when we can somehow protect the townsfolk? Can the townsfolk protect themselves? We won't know unless we speak to them, and we can't speak to them without angering Gregor. Now, it's possible the players pack it in and leave, but if they don't, and the tension mounts and erupts into a fight, we move on to the setback. Players fight the hungry mutts. Some of the mutts are in town, so they'll come as a second wave, reinforcements. Others might be elsewhere in the tower, and then Gregor is chatting with the party, literally in the same room. This whole living fight with reinforcements coming in has a ticking clock built in. Can we kill Gregor and his cronies before more show up? If the players win, we should move on to the next scene, the resolution. They can loot the tower. It's full of goodies to steal or return to the townsfolk. And they can talk to some of the townsfolk. We did it! Only if you're paying attention, you might ask, hang on, where's the climax? Well, we moved it to the next slot. The climax. An ankeg erupts out of the ground near the bodies of the hungry mutts, here to eat what's left of them. The The players thought they were done, but there was more fighting. And now they might have divided the party. Maybe they're all over the place. Regardless, at this rate, one Ankeg might be a deadly challenge. It can easily down level 3 characters, especially if the Hungry Mutts fight went poorly and they spent most of their resources. Notice, we shuffled the rooms. You can do that. It creates the shape of a story. Tragedies have been in stories for ages and they end on a negative note, like our Ankeg. And you'll notice this wasn't really a dungeon or rooms or anything like that, but it doesn't matter. It's an adventure structure. For added details, we can color each of the Hungry Mutts, give them names, unique loadouts, special features, and then basically run them as an elite team, if you remember our episode on 8 types of combat. Each pass we go over and render more details, we create a bit of verisimilitude. But we don't have to go overboard. The bandits can just be bandits. But for these guys, I made them each a little different. If you want that adventure, there's a link in the description to the PDF free on our Patreon. The beauty of adventures like this is that they're like a single episode of your favorite episodic TV show. There's an episodic arc with a dramatic open question. What do we do about the Hungry Mutts? It'll have moral roleplay, tense dialogue, fighting, loot, and a whole town you can rescue. This is classic heroic fantasy. What I love about story structures like this one is how valuable they are, not just when you're writing, but especially when you manage to internalize them. You'll develop a sense that you can feel where we are in the story. And if you want to make sure your episodic story doesn't fall flat, you can add the relevant story beats. Sometimes I'm running a game and I'm thinking, I've had the entrance and the puzzle and the setback. If I can just add climax and a resolution, we've got a good session on our hands, a whole story. This doesn't just apply to your dungeons or your adventures. Sometimes my players are just talking amongst themselves, role-playing and in character. And through their dialogue, they've already done the whole setup, just talking about their doubts, their feelings, and I realize I can add a setback and see if they can't find their way to a resolution. Those are the best sessions I've ever run, where the structure was internalized and story elements were added on the fly. You can do that too, and step number 1 is start with a 5-room dungeon structure in mind. You'll quickly be able to create compelling stories as you go. You just have to start small. Try running a 5-room dungeon tonight. If you're at a loss for which one, I provided one here in this video, and in the next few days, including today, you will see loads of them here on DungeonTube. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend. If you want more dungeons, I encourage you to check out this Dungeon Jam playlist on screen, hit shuffle, and let YouTube serve you up a glut of videos just like this one from your favorite dungeon tubers across the internet. I guarantee you'll see some of your favorites and some folks you haven't heard of, and they'll all blow you away. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.